Hey, what is up? My name is Chris and welcome to Coding in Public. Today I've got this Neumorphic designed event countdown. You'd come in here and you'd add a cool event title like Safari supports Gap or something like that. And then you select a time and you hit countdown and it counts down. And when it finally gets down to 0, here's where the extra little bit of fun comes in. It comes to 0 and you get a celebration. All right, then it shows you a new event that you can do. And let's say you come in here and you pick another event, you come down here, it's going to count down and update this all live. Now, if you want to start another one, you go ahead and just kill it, and then you can start another event. And because it's going to store it in your local storage, you can leave and then come back, and that will always just kind of be waiting there as a little status board update for you. So let's go ahead and jump in. Today, we're going to look just at the HTML and CSS. Next time, we'll look at the JavaScript, including that fun little confetti animation. We've got nothing much going on here so far, just essentially a blank HTML document. I've added my script that has exactly nothing in it currently, and then my style sheet, and then I've added a Google font called Arvo. Let's start by adding some of the HTML we need. We're going to have two different containers that will hold everything we need. The first one we'll call form container, and that will hold our form. So let's go ahead and add that. That form will have an ID of event form and a class of event form. Right now, we don't want it to have an action. We're going to prevent that anyhow when we get to the JavaScript. But inside this form, we're going to have a few things. Number one, we'll have a title. So we'll say event form title. And right now, we'll just say, let's say new event, I think is what I had on there. All right, next, we're going to have a label. And that label will be for the input title. Let's come in here and add that input. Input will have an ID of title, will be a type text, and then we will go ahead and add a placeholder. That placeholder will simply say enter an event title. We also need to be able to input the date somewhere. So we'll add another label, and this one will be for an event. That will be the ID of the input here. And for our input, we don't want to type text, we want to type date, time, local. And then let's add that ID of event to tie the label and the event together. To submit the form, we need a button, and we're just going to add it as a traditional button here. Except we will change the type to submit, and the value of the text will say add new countdown. Now inside this button, we want to have a couple things. We do want, I need another quotation mark here. We want to have both that value, and then we also want to have an SVG. Now, I'm just going to open up here. Let's go to Iconic app right here. Here we go. This is a cool little icon area that's got all these free icons. You can do whatever you want with. So let's go ahead and search for calendar, because they've got a cool calendar option here for adding a calendar. Copy this, and you do have to be logged in, but it is free, and then we'll just paste it directly in our HTML. Let's come back here and go ahead and save it, and then see everything update. Now, looks like we actually need to add the text in here as well, beyond just this value. I think originally I hadn't put the SVG in here, and I needed that, but now let's just add the text directly to the actual button down here. All right, now we refresh, and it shows there. Okay, cool. We're halfway done with the HTML. Now we just need to add our extra area down here. We're going to call not form container, but event container. This will be the div that we populate with a new event. Let's give ourselves a little more space. If we jump back over this way, you'll see that if we add this event, this is kind of messed up. We can fix this in JavaScript, but we've got these four laid out next to each other. We've got a title, we've got a button here, and then we've got this kind of block area. So first, let's go ahead and have like the actual event card itself. So we'll just say event is what we're going to call that div that's kind of outside everything, that large box. Now we're going to position that button in the top right with absolute positioning. So we can put it anywhere. Let's go ahead and just put it right here. We're going to call this event button. And let's come back over here to Iconic and search for like trash or something like that. I think this is the one I use, so I'll copy the code and paste it over here. Next, let's add the title. That will just have a class of event title. And right now we can just say title or something like that, and I'll put it in all caps to remind myself to remove it later. Now each of those 4 sections are going to be wrapped in a div called event countdown. We'll call those event item. Each event item will have a title. We'll just have a class of event item title, and then an ID of whatever item we're looking at. So like the day would be the first thing. And here we could say, I don't know, 15 or something like that. And the next thing would be a paragraph tag with an ID of day name. And here for now, we'll just say days. And again, I will make sure to remove that eventually. If I save it, you'll see it shows up this way. Let's go ahead and copy this down 3 times. We're going to change this one to hours, this one to minutes, and this one to seconds. I'm going to update all the other IDs here to match, and I'll be right back. All right, that's all the HTML we need to write. Let's go ahead and remove all this extra space, and we're set to go there. Now let's come over to our CSS, and I've got a few things. I've got a basic clear going. Then I went ahead and just got some variables in here so you don't have to see me type out colors. But we're going to use these kind of offsets of this blue and white and gray color to set up some box shadows. Here we've got normal sized one, medium sized ones, and large ones. We've got a radius, we've got a transition, and then I've just got my actual body font set and ready to go. Normally the easiest way to position everything in the center would be to do something like display grid and then place items center, but we're going to be using just those 2 areas, and we're going to have them both positioned absolute. So we'll just say position of relative, which is going to be the default anyhow, but it's just a good reminder to place that on there. Let's go ahead and set up the background color itself, and we'll use our variable of blue, and then set the color of the text everywhere to our variable of dark. Now, because we want this to always stretch the full height of the screen, we'll set a min height of 100 view height to make sure it's always at least that size. We'll add a padding of 2 rem, and that should give us enough kind of space everywhere, even if we scrunch down the screen on like a mobile device. Okay, next let's come in here and take our form container. And again, we want this to be position of absolute. We'll set this at a left of 50% and top of 50%. That should place it directly in the center from this corner right here. Now to get it actually in the center of the body, which is its parent element, we'll have to transform it by its own height and width, and we'll say translate, and we'll say negative 50% and negative 50%, and that should put it directly in the center. Let's set our background color to our light variable, which is just an off-white. And then we'll set a padding. We'll do 4 rem and a border top of 2 pixels, solid, and then we'll do var of white. Now, often when we have like this neumorphic design, you actually have that kind of variation or that kind of border on the top. So I'll save this so you can see here. See how it looks like there's like light coming down from up top. So that combined with the drop shadow is what gives you kind of that 3D effect. Speaking of the box shadow, let's go ahead and set that up. Here we're going to use some variables that we set up earlier. Box shadow 1. We're going to do the large one. And then we'll do a box shadow 2. And again, we're going to choose the large version. When I save this, you'll see it pops off the screen like that, which I think is kind of a cool effect. Let's set the border radius of the whole thing. And again, we've got a var of our radius, and that's what we'll be using here on this form container. Now, I think neumorphic designs can kind of be overdone, but hopefully this is tasteful enough and still visible. You can see what all the elements are, and as we style it more, hopefully that'll just be more so the case. We're going to show or hide this entire form container with a class in JavaScript, and we will apply it that way, but it'll just be the class of hidden. And for there, we're going to have an opacity of 0 and pointer events of none. And then to make sure we get a transition, we'll come in here and set the opacity here to 1 and pointer events of all, and set our transition to our variable of transition, all. When we toggle on that hidden class, then it'll move away and kind of fade into the background, and our event will pop up. Next, let's go ahead and grab the event form. For this one, we'll say display grid. We want a grid gap that's kind of automatically sets everything 2 rem apart inside that grid container. We'll do text align of center. Next, let's grab the event form title. Let's set the font size to 6 rem, which will be rather large. Padding to 0 and 0.2 m. Now, m basically is going to scale based on the size of the font, so that should treat us well. And then we'll say margin bottom of -1 rem. Now, all of our inputs, both the title and the date, we want to share a lot of characteristics. So let's actually just add some styling to every input tag on the page. That styling will be 100% width. We want it to go as large as it can. And because most browsers have their own style for forms, we want to make sure that our font family is inherited from the body. And our color, let's add some padding to give a little more space. We'll do like 1.4 m and 2 m. Font size, let's do 2 rem. And then these inputs are going to have that same color as their parent element. So we'll say background color will be that var of light. So that inside kind of the text area will have that same color. Again, they are going to have a border. It'll be a 2 pixel solid transparent. Now you might say, why are we adding a transparent border? Well, it's because we're going to basically toggle on the border on focus. And so we want to make sure that that happens smoothly and it's not jumping up and down. And then the border top here will change to say 2 pixels solid. And again, just like the parent container, will be the var of white. This will have that same border radius, a var radius. And then we'll have a box shadow. And this one we're going to use the small, which actually, if I remember right, I think I just left alone. Yeah, just like that. We'll have another one too. And that will be box shadow 2 here. Set a transition on here of our var transition all. Now let me show you how these box shadows work. And I just saved it so you see everything kind of pop up there. These box shadows, one of them is going to come in here and it's rather largely blurred and it's a little bit of it's a darker color. And then above, so that's kind of the one below, up above here we have a light color, usually something white or nearly white up top and kind of pulled the opposite way. So we've got a light one up here and a dark one down below. That's what's happening on the parent container as well. I think this border radius needs to be bigger. Let's do something more like 1 rem. Yeah, that should more like 16 pixels, and that should makes it look a little bit better there. Let's set the placeholder styling for our input, and this will be our color of our gray. Of course, I have to spell a color correctly. Let's come down to our button, which is, we could grab it a bunch of different ways, but just to show you how you can grab like attributes, you can grab submit. So type submit is our attribute on that button, and we'll say display flex. Remember, it's got 2 things, the text and the icon in it. Say justify content of center to place everything in the middle, and then align items of center to place it up and down vertically the same. Because this is a button, an actual button tag, we need to make sure that we take the font family and inherit that from the body. And then for the font size, we'll say 2 rem. Padding will be the same as our inputs above, so 1.4 m and 2 m. The border radius, you guessed it, is our var of radius. Now again, we want there to be some styling on the actual button to look like a button. So we're going to add a cursor of pointer on here and then set the color of the text to our var of light, which is the same as the background of the parent, because the button itself is going to have a background color of our var dark. We want to show a border on hover. And so that, again, it's not a kind of a janky experience here. We're going to add a border of 4 pixels, solid, and transparent. And then we will show some color on that border on hover, but it won't jump the screen up and down because we already have a border on there. That also allows us to transition it, and so we can set our transition all variable on the button. For the box shadow, we're going to use our medium box shadow. So we'll set, first of all, box shadow 1, and then box shadow 2. And I think that's it. Let's save it. That looks just about right. Let's come in here and grab, again, our type of submit. So this time I don't just want that, I actually want the SVG inside of it, which is that calendar icon. Now, I think it needs to actually be a little bit bigger. So for now, let's just go ahead and do this rather than kind of re-grabbing it from the site. We'll just scale it up twice as big. And we'll set a margin right of 10 pixels. Now, because we don't want people to click that instead of the button, let's go ahead and set our pointer events to none so that if they accidentally click the SVG and not the actual button itself, that we can still handle that in JavaScript. Now, right now, if you come in here and you click inside here, you get this kind of blue border again here, and then nothing happens here. So let's go ahead and start working on some of those hover states. So we've changed the placeholder. Let's go ahead and change the input for focus. And then our button is going to share some of these same things. So let's go ahead and grab our button, which I suppose we could do type submit too, but just showing you kind of a few different ways we can select that button here. Say outline of none, and then a box shadow of none. For all three of these, when they're selected, when they're either hovered for the button, I guess, or selected for either of them, we want a border of 2 pixels solid, and we want our var of blue. Let's go ahead and copy this down, just the button, and remove that input because we want to do some special things just to the button itself. Start with, we want a border here of 4 pixels solid and our var of dark, which I suppose we shouldn't have kept up above. I don't know. Should we keep this the same? Maybe let's do this. Let's make it a little less messy, easier to edit. We'll just keep the button together and the inputs together. And then let's come down here and maybe to keep it consistent, let's switch out both of these here with that type submit. The color of the text, once you select it, it's going to change from this white, and we want it to change to our var of dark. And we want the background color to change to our var of light. Remember, it's going to have a border around it. So as we come over here, you see that's what happens. It kind of pushes down into the screen is from 3D, and then the border comes on and all this changes. Now, because we added the SVG in the HTML like that, and on here we've got the stroke set to current color, it's going to take the current color of the parent container, which is the button itself. And that's how we can change the text and that SVG at the same time. I think that basically takes care of our event container. Let's go ahead and add our hidden class to this. And I said event container, I think it's actually the form, yeah, the form container we just did. Say hidden, and now that's out of there. Speaking of our event container though, let's go ahead and grab that, and we're gonna work on the event styling itself. Here we'll say display grid, and a grid gap of 3 rem. So let's set that, I think we set it more to like 6 rem to make it a little larger. Width of 100%. A max width of, let's do 800 pixels, and a margin of 6 rem, auto, and 4 rem. So that's 6 rem up top, auto side to side, and then 4 rem down below. Now the actual event itself, that's the card that shows up, not just the container. We want the background color of that to be very similar to what we did before. So we'll do light, so that'll be the same as the background of the entire, I think actually the body was blue, but so it's like that off-white color. Padding of 4 rem, border top will be 2 pixels solid, var of white, and our border radius will be our radius variable that we set up. And box shadow will be the exact same, I think, as that large one that we did earlier on the form container. So we'll say large, and I think it was the first one there, and then large will be the second one. Yeah, like that. Now, if we're going to position this where we need it to go, we're also going to change this event container to a position of absolute. And then since we just did this up top here, let's go ahead and just grab it. There we go, that left top right. And we'll come down here and place everything in the middle. Let me save it, and you see it, everything populates just like we want it to. Now it's not quite in the middle of the screen, and that's because I have this margin set to 6 rem up top and 4 at the bottom. I don't remember why I did that, so let's remove it. I don't like it. All right. But the next thing we need to work on is our event button. Now the event button is an actual button here, so we can select it with like a tab or whatever, but remember we want it positioned up here in the top right-hand corner of the card. So we'll say position of absolute, and we want it right, -2 rem, and top -2 rem. Now to position that SVG in the center, the easiest way to do that, again, is just to display grid and place item center. That's what I usually do for these things if you've watched my other videos. And then we want a border radius on this, not like all the other things. We actually want it to be 50%. So it's a circle. And then we do want our cursor to be a pointer when we hover over that. The color of it, and remember since we put the SVG again in the actual HTML with the current color set on the stroke, we can just set the color of this parent container to light. And we do want a border. We'll do 4 pixels, solid of transparent. And that's what we'll use to kind of hover on and off, and we can animate it then or transition it because we've got some kind of border on the natural state of it. Background color will be our var of dark. We'll set our transition to the var of transition all. And our box shadow, again, we'll set this one as the medium one. So we'll say var of medium and then var of medium. So that's 1 and 2. All right, moment of truth, let's save it. Okay, it's up there, but it's kind of small. All right, let's grab the event. I think both of these I'd originally had smaller, and I must have just forgotten to make them bigger when I copied them over. So let's change this. What was it? SVG, and we'll just say transform scale of 2. So that works. It's larger, but now it's breaking out of its container, and I think we just need to add a padding on here. So we'll add a padding of 1 rem, and that looks about right. Now, whenever this event button, whenever we hover over it, or whenever it is focused, we want to add a border of 4 pixels, solid, and we're going to use our variable of dark. This will be just like the actual form button itself. It has kind of the same characteristics. Box shadow, we will set to none. Outline, we will set to none. And then the color, which changes the SVG, will be our var of dark, same as the border outside it. And then background color, we'll pick up that off-white from the parent container. Okay, cool. So let's come over here and hover over it, and that works just as expected. Okay, the only thing we've got left is the actual text inside. So we're getting close. Let's grab the event title. We'll do display of flex, justify content of center to put everything in the middle, left to right, and then margin bottom of 2 rem and font size of, let's do 4 rem. Let's bump this up to, I think, something like that, 4 rem at the bottom. All 4 of those sections are in what we called an event countdown. That was the name of the div that held them all together. And this we can just do display of grid. Now, I know flex is good for this kind of stuff, but I really like the gap property, and since that's not really working all across as was evidenced by my event earlier, let's go ahead and just do display of grid. We can still lay stuff side to side if we do grid template columns here. We'll just do repeat auto fit, and then a min max of 80 pixels, and then 1 fraction. This grid gap then we can set to 1.5 rem, and that should spread everything out. Now the cool thing is if we get smaller and it can't fit those, it'll eventually jump them down, but we won't take the time to open the DevTools to see that. Let's come and grab the event item, and we're going to set the color to var dark. For all of these, let's add a padding of 1.2 m and 2 m. Then a font size, we'll do a 2rem. The background color for these will actually be the same as the parent container. That was our var of light, that off-white color. So if I save it, you can't really see a whole lot going on right here. Now, in many ways, this event item will share a lot of the characteristics of our, let's see, of our inputs here. So let's go ahead and capture all of this and just bring this down here. And we'll paste it in. Say we don't need that, and we don't need that. The rest of that we will keep, and you see they kind of pop off there just as you'd want them to. Now we do actually need to set all of these themselves. They're already in a grid container, but they themselves will also have a grid, and we're just going to place items in the center. And I think what I did is I think I made the titles 2rem and everything else 1. So let's see, let's shrink that back down, and then let's grab the event item here. And I think we had maybe title like that, if I remember right. 2rem, let's save it. Nope, let's check. What was the HTML here? Event title. This is what I'm trying to grab. I'm not sure why he called it event title. I think this should be event item title. Let's change it over here. And if you hold Command D and just keep pressing it, you see it will just select whatever you're working on. So event item title, and then let's come over here and save that. Okay, perfect. So everything is pretty much done. We'll come in here and hover. That should work just fine. And let's see, this still doesn't look like it's quite right. Let's double check that before we close out the video. We got it left 50%, top 50%, and then this translate on. I think it may just be that this margin is too big to be shared properly. So let's change it down to 3rem. And that looks about right to me. Now, as up above with the form container, you might remember we hid everything with this hidden class, and we're going to need to do the same thing with the event container. So let's come in here and jump on here. Same thing there, except we're going to change this to what? Event. And then remove this here. And then let's save it. And whenever we have this hidden class on, that should disappear as well. So let's just test that. Add our hidden class. And it's gone. Nothing like finishing a project with nothing on the screen. All right, well, that's where we're leaving it. Next time we'll work on the JavaScript. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this kind of content, please go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Share it with others too. And if you have questions or comments, go ahead and leave them in the description. All right, thanks so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Happy coding.